No contact doesn't fail with avoidance because you're weak, or because you weren't lovable enough, or because you didn't do it long enough. It fails because most people unknowingly keep feeding the exact emotional system that allowed the avoidant dynamic to survive in the first place. They remove the text messages, but they keep the emotional leash. They stop calling, but they keep orbiting. They go quiet externally while staying loud internally, and an avoidant nervous system can feel the difference between clean absence and performative silence. The biggest illusion people fall for is thinking no contact is a tactic to trigger regret. That mindset is already half contact, because if your silence is designed to control their emotions, your nervous system is still tied to their response. You're still waiting for the notification that proves your worth. You're still listening for the sound of the door opening. That is not a boundary, that's a strategy. And strategies collapse when anxiety rises. Boundaries hold when emotions fluctuate. Avoidants are not like anxious partners who often respond quickly to emotional absence with panic and immediate pursuit. Many avoidants feel relief first. Less pressure, less expectation, less emotional demand. And if you don't understand that timing, you'll misread the early quiet as proof that no contact isn't working. But what's really happening is that their system is decompressing in a push-pull dynamic. Your emotional intensity may have become the background noise they use to justify their distance. When that noise disappears, they don't immediately feel loss, they feel quiet. And quiet at first can feel like safety to them. This is why no contact isn't about creating instant pain in them. It's about removing the emotional oxygen that sustained the cycle. When you were always available to explain, reassure, forgive, and reopen the door, the avoidant system could keep one foot out without real consequences. But clean no contact says, that version of me is no longer accessible. It's not punishment, it's reality. And reality takes time to land. Most people never reach that point because they keep the emotional system alive through invisible contact. They check stories every day. They interpret likes, they reread old chats. They ask friends for updates. They post in ways designed to get a reaction. And their energy remains emotionally directed at the avoidant. So even if you're not texting, you're still engaged in the same attachment loop. Your body is still in pursuit. Your mind is still in negotiation. Your heart is still bargaining for a different version of them. And here's the truth that can sting, but will free you. The avoidant doesn't need your physical presence to feel your emotional availability. The pattern has already trained them to expect that you will eventually return to trying. When you do temporary no contact 3 days, 5 days, 2 weeks, and then reappear with warmth, you confirm the safest belief for an avoidant who prefers control through distance. This is not permanent. I can wait this out. Your silence becomes a pause, not a shift, a mood, not a standard. So the first keynote is really about identity, not time frame. No contact becomes powerful the moment it stops being a countdown to their return and becomes a door you close to protect your peace. The energy changes when you stop doing no contact to prove a point and start doing it to reclaim your emotional center. When you stop thinking, this will make them realize, and start thinking, this will make me stable again. Because an avoidant is not destabilized by your anger as much as they're destabilized by your calm finality. The old you may have reacted loudly. The new you disappears quietly and doesn't need an audience for your boundary. That's when the system changes. That's when your absence stops feeling like a tactic and starts feeling like consequence. And this is why people who say, no contact didn't work, often reveal something in one sentence. They were measuring success by whether the avoidant came back. But the deeper success is whether you stop bleeding yourself, worth into a dynamic that keeps you uncertain. Did your sleep improve? Did your anxiety decrease? Did you stop checking your phone like it was a heartbeat monitor? Did you remember who you were before this became an emotional job? Because the real purpose of no contact is not to win someone who couldn't maintain consistent love. It's to reset your nervous system out of survival mode. It's to interrupt the addiction to intermittent reinforcement. It's to break the cycle where crumbs of attention felt like a feast because you were starving for stability. So this is the blunt truth. No contact fails when your body is still in pursuit even if your phone is quiet. It fails when your silence is performative, when your self-respect is conditional, when your boundary is secretly a plea. It succeeds when your absence is clean, when your inner identity shifts, when you stop negotiating with someone's inconsistency and start honoring your own standards. That is when no contact stops being a fragile strategy and becomes the strongest self-respecting decision you've made in the entire relationship. The first 2 mistakes that destroy no contact faster than anything else are announcing it like a negotiation and breaking it too early. And the reason they're so deadly is because they quietly teach the avoidant nervous system that your absence is not real. It's emotional theater. It's a temporary protest, not a permanent boundary. And when an avoidant senses that, they don't feel the gravity of loss. They feel the comfort of predictability. They think, this will pass. They'll come back. They always do. Announcing no contact sounds strong on the surface, but the energy underneath it often gives you away. I'm going no contact so you can realize what you lost. I'm blocking you to teach you a lesson. Don't talk to me until you're ready to commit. That kind of statement can feel empowering in the moment, but it also reveals something to an avoidant who is skilled at emotional distance. It reveals that your silence still depends on their reaction. You're still emotionally negotiating. You're still staying connected through outcome expectation. That's not the clean emotional break that disrupts an avoidant pattern. That's an emotional message wrapped in a boundary costume. Real no contact is not a speech. It's a decision. The power is not in telling them you're leaving. The power is in leaving in a way that doesn't require their permission, their remorse, or their immediate realization for you to stay gone. Because the moment you announce no contact with a dramatic emotional charge, you create a new opening for the avoidant to manage the situation. They can argue, they can soften you, they can delay you, they can wait for you to cool down. You've turned a boundary into a conversation, and conversations are where avoidant patterns often regain control. This is why the most effective no contact often looks almost boring. No long goodbye, no emotional essays, no threat of blocking for impact. It's quiet withdrawal from a dynamic that has cost you peace. It communicates a new reality without turning it into a performance. The avoidant doesn't get a front row seat to your pain. They don't get to manage your emotions through reassurance or distance. They lose access to the version of you that used to explain, chase, and reopen the door after each inconsistency. Then comes the second fatal mistake, breaking no contact too early. This is where most people lose their power before the boundary even has a chance to breathe. 3 days, 5 days, a week, 2 weeks. Then the anxiety peaks and you reach out, or you feel guilty, or you miss them, or you remember a sweet moment, or you fear that silence will make them move on. And you think the message is harmless. You think it's just one check-in. But the avoidant nervous system doesn't read it as a harmless check-in. It reads it as confirmation that your absence was temporary. It reads it as proof that they don't have to change their pattern to regain access. It reads it as reinforcement of the old system, where your emotional availability is reliable even when their emotional consistency is not. This is the brutal truth many people don't want to hear. Short no contact followed by outreach doesn't just fail. It strengthens the avoidant's comfort with distance. Because now they've learned a safe rhythm. You withdraw when you're hurt. You return when your emotions soften. So they don't have to feel real loss. They only have to wait out your boundary wave. That turns no contact into a predictable cycle rather than a meaningful consequence. And this is where your mindset matters more than your calendar. When you go no contact with the secret expectation that it will force a chase, your nervous system remains hooked to timing. You start counting days. You start checking phones. You start interpreting silence. You start feeling like failure means they haven't reached out yet. That pressure makes your boundary fragile. Because you're not doing no contact for your peace, you're doing it for their reaction. And that is why so many people break too early, because their silence was never rooted in inner stability. It was rooted in external validation hope. The deeper goal of this keynote is to shift your identity. You're not going no contact to create a scene. You're going no contact to change the rules of access to you. You're stepping out of a connection that has trained your nervous system to accept inconsistency as normal. You're reclaiming your emotional center so your self-worth doesn't depend on a person who becomes warm only when you are about to leave. So if you want no contact to actually carry weight with an avoidant, you must remove its performative layer. Don't announce it like a threat. Don't present it like a punishment. Don't give them a script that tells them exactly how to handle you. Make it clean. Make it calm. Make it real. And if you choose to step away, don't sabotage your own boundary with early re-entry that teaches them your absence is negotiable. Because the most powerful message no contact can ever send is not, I want you to miss me. It's, I'm no longer available for a love that only shows up when it's convenient. That is when the avoidant system feels the difference. That is when your silence stops being a moment and becomes a shift. And whether they return or not, you win the most important outcome of all, the return of your self-respect. The silent killers of no contact are the ones that look harmless, the ones people don't even count as breaking the rule. But they keep your nervous system chained to the same old dynamic. You can stop texting an avoidant and still keep the emotional loop alive if you're checking their social media, sending accidental messages, using friends as messengers, or treating silence like a punishment instead of a boundary. This is where most no-contact attempts die quietly, not with a dramatic relapse, with 1,000 tiny leaks that keep the attachment system breathing. Let's start with the most common one, social media checking. You tell yourself it's not contact because you didn't message them, but your mind is still in pursuit. You watch their stories like they're clues. You scan their likes like they're confessions. You interpret every post as a hidden message about you. And what happens to your body in that process is everything. Your mood rises and falls based on their online behavior. Your anxiety spikes when they look happy. Your hope spikes when they post something sad. You become emotionally reactive to a person you're supposedly detaching from. That is not no contact. That is no peace. This matters even more with avoidance because avoidant patterns are often fueled by the comfort of psychological distance. If you are still orbiting, still watching, still emotionally tracking them, your energy hasn't truly left the relationship. You may not be physically present, but your nervous system is still available. The whole point of no contact is to remove access and to stop rewarding inconsistency with emotional availability. But social media stalking keeps the reward system alive on your side. You're still investing attention in someone who isn't investing stability back. You're still training your brain to treat them as your emotional center of gravity. The second silent killer is indirect contact, the wrong send, the casual meme, the one line "hope you're well," the short check-in you call neutral, the message that's technically small but emotionally loaded. A lot of people do this because direct contact feels too vulnerable, but indirect contact feels safe enough to test the water. You're trying to see if they'll respond warmly without admitting you miss them. But avoidants are often most comfortable with vague lanes. If you leave a crack in the door, they can keep the connection in the gray zone where they don't have to deepen, define, or commit. So your indirect contact doesn't pull them into clarity. It often keeps them in the exact emotional environment they prefer. And here's the brutal truth. Every indirect message becomes a soft reset of consequences. It quietly tells them, access isn't gone, it's just paused. That's why avoidants who are leaning on distance as a coping style don't feel the full impact of your boundary if you keep providing little signals of availability. You're not letting reality land. You're cushioning it. The third silent killer is using no contact as silent punishment. This one is tricky because it can feel empowering at first. You're angry. You feel discarded. You feel used. So you withdraw with a charged energy of, now you'll see what it feels like. But punishment is still a form of engagement. It still positions them as the central audience of your decision. And punishment-based silence is fragile because it depends on emotion staying hot. When the anger melts into loneliness, you're more likely to break it. Healthy no contact isn't fueled by rage. It's fueled by self-respect. Avoidance can also sense the tone behind silence. If your absence is dramatic, performative, and emotionally loud even without words, it can trigger a familiar dance. They may reappear just enough to calm the storm, then withdraw again when the intensity fades. Because the relationship wasn't rebuilt on new standards, it was just reactivated by emotional energy. That is how the old cycle survives. This is why the strongest form of no contact is quiet, clean, and boring to anyone watching from the outside. It's not a protest, it's not a performance, it's not a strategy to provoke regret. It's a boundary that says, I am not available for emotional uncertainty anymore. And that boundary has weight because it does not require them to understand it immediately for you to maintain it. You can tell the difference between punishment silence and self-respect silence by one simple question. Are you doing this to control their behavior or to protect your peace? If your primary goal is to trigger them, your nervous system is still tied to their response. If your primary goal is to stabilize yourself, the boundary becomes real. The whole point of this keynote is to help you close the leaks. Because no contact is not just about what you do with your phone. It's about what you do with your focus, your energy, your identity. If your mind is still monitoring them, chasing meaning, searching for signs, you are still emotionally in the relationship. And an avoidant dynamic will keep feeding on that psychological availability even if you're silent. So when you remove the silent killers, something finally shifts. You stop watching, you stop hinting, you stop punishing, you stop negotiating without words. And you start reclaiming the only thing no contact was always meant to give you first, your clarity, your dignity, your nervous system, and your self-respect. The avoidant timing shock is one of the biggest reasons people believe no contact doesn't work, because what you expect to happen first is not what often happens first. If you're anxious, leaning, or deeply bonded, you imagine that your disappearance will trigger immediate panic, instant regret, urgent pursuit. You expect the silence to hit them the way it hits you. But avoidant nervous systems don't always respond to absence with immediate longing. Many respond with relief first. And if you don't understand that, you'll break your boundary too early and accidentally prove the exact lesson that keeps the cycle alive. Relief doesn't mean they never cared. Relief doesn't mean you were unlovable. Relief means the avoidant nervous system often experiences closeness as demand, pressure, or emotional weight, even when the relationship was loving. In a push-pull dynamic, your desire for clarity, reassurance, or consistent connection may have become the very thing their body learned to resist. So when you go silent, the first sensation can be decompression. Less expectation, less emotional responsibility, less fear of being pulled into an intensity they don't know how to manage. This short-term relief is not the final verdict on your value. It's the first exhale of a system that believes space equals safety. Here is the shock that most people miss. Avoidants often process loss in delayed waves. In the early phase of no contact, they might feel calm. They might look fine. They might even appear happier. And this is where the anxious mind spirals. See, they never cared. My silence means nothing. I should message to remind them what we had. But that reaction is exactly what resets the old pattern. Because the moment you reach back out during the relief phase, you remove the consequence before it becomes real. You teach the avoidant system that your absence is temporary, emotional, and reversible. This is why no contact cannot be measured by day 3 feelings, or week 1 silence, or the first quiet stretch where nothing dramatic happens. A real boundary works like a slow reality landing. At first, the nervous system experiences space as comfort. Then, as time passes and your absence remains consistent, new sensations can emerge: curiosity, reflection, a subtle sense of missing your energy, a confrontation with the fact that you are not waiting in the same place, holding the emotional door open. And that is where the shift often begins, not because they suddenly become a different person overnight, but because the environment that supported their emotional avoidance loses oxygen. This timing reality also explains why so many people get trapped by fake progress. They interpret early relief as indifference. Then they panic and break no contact. The avoidant responds because your return restores the familiar dynamic. And for a moment, it feels like you were right to worry. You get warmth, you get attention, you get that intoxicating sense of reconnection. But what you actually did was interrupt the consequent stage before it started. You rescued the avoidant from the discomfort that could have produced real reflection. You restored access without requiring growth. And the cycle becomes stronger, because now they've learned a new rhythm. You will go silent when hurt, but you will come back before your absence becomes permanent. The avoidant timing shock also protects you from misreading breadcrumbs. When avoidants start to feel the absence more deeply, their first move is not always a full, mature return. It can be a small probe. Hey, a late-night check-in. A neutral question that tests whether you are still emotionally available. And many people mistake that first probe for proof of transformation. But contact is not change. Contact is a test of access. If your boundary is real, that first probe meets standards, not instant full access. Because no contact is not just about silence. It is about a new entry price into your life. This is also where your inner identity has to be stronger than your romantic hope. Because the timing shock tempts you to chase reassurance, and the breadcrumbs tempt you to accept less than you deserve. But the purpose of no contact is not to create a dramatic movie scene where they come running. The purpose is to remove you from a system where your value was constantly being negotiated by their inconsistency. It is to reset your nervous system out of addiction mode. It is to protect you from the trap of waiting for a person to give you the certainty you already have a right to require. So if the avoidant looks quiet at first, if they seem relieved, if nothing happens immediately, that does not mean no contact is failing. It often means the process is actually unfolding in the correct psychological order. Their system is decompressing. Your absence is becoming real. The old dynamic is losing its grip. And at the same time, your nervous system is learning something even more important than whether they return. It is learning that you can survive without chasing, that you can choose dignity over anxiety, that your peace is not a reward they get to grant you. The timing shock is not a reason to give up. It is the reason to stay consistent with your boundary long enough for reality to become undeniable, for them and for you. The breadcrumb trap is one of the most humiliating, heart-draining places you can fall after no contact, because it gives you the illusion of victory while quietly resetting the cycle that hurt you in the first place. A breadcrumb is not a real return. It's a temperature check. It's emotional fishing. It's a low-effort message designed to test whether you're still available without requiring them to bring clarity, accountability, or consistent behavior to the table. And this is why this keynote matters so much. Because avoidants, especially those who have relied on distance as a coping style, often don't re-enter with a full, mature commitment first. They re-enter with a probe. Miss you. A late night, how are you? A meme. A casual question that sounds harmless on the surface. And if you're still emotionally attached, your heart hears it like a love song. Your nervous system hears it like oxygen. You think, it worked. They're back. They finally realized. But the truth is simple. Contact is easy. Repair is rare. A breadcrumb is not proof of change. It's proof of access still being possible. It's the avoidant testing the old door. Are you still warm? Are you still waiting? Are you still willing to offer intimacy without structure? And if your response is immediate, emotional, or fully open, you answer that test for them without ever meaning to. You teach them, I don't need to come back differently. I just need to come back. This is how no contact gets undone in one message. Now let's be honest about why breadcrumbs are so addictive. Because no contact is lonely, and the anxious part of you wants relief more than it wants wisdom. You're not foolish for feeling that. Your body has been trained by intermittent reinforcement. The relationship likely had a push-pull rhythm where warmth arrived after distance. So when you receive a breadcrumb, your brain treats it like the return of safety. You get a rush of hope. You get a surge of meaning. You start imagining the reunion you've been rehearsing in your mind. And that emotional flood can override your standards in seconds. But a healed relationship never starts with a vague hello. A healed relationship starts with ownership. It starts with, I know I hurt you. I know I was inconsistent. I want to rebuild this in a real way. What do you need to feel safe with me again? That is a return. A breadcrumb is the opposite. It's comfort without responsibility. And here's the deeper danger. When you reward breadcrumbs, you make the avoidant style even more stable in their nervous system. Because now they learn that even after distance, even after confusion, even after hurting you, they can send a small signal and regain full emotional access. That removes any urgency to grow. It removes any reason to rebuild trust properly. It turns your no contact into a reset button that benefits them more than it protects you. That's why this keynote is not just about what they do. It's about what you allow. You are not required to be harsh. You are not required to be cold. But you are required to be clear if you want your peace. So what does healthy clarity look like when a breadcrumb shows up? It looks like you slowing down. It looks like you not replying from adrenaline. It looks like you asking yourself one honest question. Is this message moving toward real repair, or is it just reopening access? Because the way an avoidant returns matters more than the fact that they returned. You're not looking for words that touch your heart. You're looking for patterns that protect it. A breadcrumb often avoids direction. It avoids definition. It avoids responsibility. It is intentionally light so nothing has to be acknowledged. And when you respond as if it's a full return, you create emotional intimacy without emotional safety. That's how the old cycle restarts, better dressed. The most respectful way to handle a breadcrumb is to match it with standard, not emotion. You can respond with something calm, short, and structured if you choose to respond at all. Something like, I'm open to a real conversation if we're talking about rebuilding with clarity and consistency. You're not begging, you're not accusing. You are simply setting the entry condition that protects your future self. And if they disappear after that, if that is data, it doesn't mean you failed. It means you refused to be pulled back into undefined access. It means they wanted the comfort of you, not the responsibility of loving you well. This is why the breadcrumb trap is such a powerful filter. It reveals whether their return is about connection or control, whether their message is about growth or convenience, whether they are ready to meet you in a healthier structure or only interested in reviving a familiar pattern where you carry the emotional weight. So the purpose of this keynote is to help you stop confusing movement with meaning. A message is movement. A changed pattern is meaning. A is not a rebuilt relationship. A late night miss you is not a commitment to your emotional safety. It might be a starting signal, yes, but only if it is followed by ownership, effort, and a clear direction. Because the real power of no contact is not that it makes someone reach out. The real power is that it makes you strong enough to require that if they come back differently. The ultimate rule that changes everything is this: no contact is not complete unless it comes with a new entry price. Because without standards for re-entry, no contact becomes a revolving door. You disappear, they reappear, you melt, the cycle resets, and the avoidant learns the most dangerous lesson of all, that your absence is emotional weather, not a new reality. Most people believe no contact is about silence. But silence alone is not the boundary. The boundary is the shift in access. The boundary is the end of unconditional emotional availability. The boundary is the moment your nervous system stops being a free resource for someone who hasn't earned stability with you. If you remove yourself for a while and then allow them back with zero structure, you have basically taught them that time is the only price they need to pay. Not growth, not accountability, not consistency. Just waiting long enough for your softness to reopen the door. And that's why avoidant cycles become so stubborn, because avoidant patterns often survive on ambiguity and low consequences. They can withdraw and you will eventually explain. They can go quiet and you will eventually chase. They can return with a simple, "Hey," and you will eventually forgive the entire past because the relief feels like love. So no contact without a new entry price doesn't change the relationship. It just pauses it. This is where you have to understand a painful truth. The avoidant return is not always the same thing as the avoidant reform. A return is easy. A reform requires humility. It requires ownership. It requires a new pattern that can be sustained when emotions cool down. So when they come back after no contact, the question is not, do they miss me? The question is, do they have a safer relationship structure to offer me now? That structure is the entry price. The entry price is not punishment. It is protection. It is clarity. It is your self-respect becoming a standard instead of a vibe. A new entry price might look like consistent communication. Not luxury texts, just reliability. It might look like defined direction. Are we rebuilding with intention or just reactivating chemistry? It might look like honest accountability. A simple acknowledgement of what hurt you instead of pretending the past was nothing. It might look like boundaries that are mutually respected, not just demanded from you. Because when someone returns without acknowledging the damage, they're often returning to comfort, not to change. And the old comfort they remember is your unlimited emotional access, your patience, your forgiveness on speed dial, your willingness to accept the bare minimum because your heart is hungry for certainty. Your job is to shut down that familiar system and build a healthier one. This is also where many people get fooled by emotional intensity. The avoidant may come back with warmth, nostalgia, and even vulnerability. They may say beautiful things. They may sound like a person who cannot live without you. But if that emotion is not linked to new behavioral agreements, you are about to repeat the same pain with a new soundtrack. Words without a pattern are not a return. They're a reset button designed to regain access. So the healthiest response to a return is not to collide with your feelings. It's to anchor in your standards. You don't need to be harsh. You don't need to play power games. You just need to be consistent with the new rules of your life. You can say something calm and truthful like, "I'm open to a real conversation if we're rebuilding with consistency and clarity," or "I'm not available for the old cycle. If we talk, it needs to be with direction and mutual effort." That one sentence changes everything because it stops the relationship from defaulting to the old emotional highway. This entry price also protects you from the breadcrumb trap, because once you know what you require, A isn't confusing anymore. It's not cruel to require structure. It's compassionate to your future self. It saves you from relapsing into a connection that makes your nervous system feel unsafe. You are not rejecting love. You are rejecting the version of love that asks you to accept uncertainty as a lifestyle. And here's the deeper transformation. This rule is not only about them. It's about you becoming a new version of yourself in the absence. If you go no contact but return to the relationship as the same self-abandoning person you were before, you are not changing the system. The system will reassemble around your old patterns. But if you go no contact and build your identity stronger, your standards clearer, your self-regulation deeper, you return as someone who cannot be placed back into the old cycle without your consent. That's the real power shift. Because avoidants are often confronted not by your anger, but by your calm boundaries. When you stop being emotionally negotiable, your value becomes undeniable. You become someone who can be loved well or not loved at all, but not loved halfway. And if they can't meet the entry price, that is not your loss. That is your protection working, because the purpose of no contact is not to guarantee a reunion. The purpose is to end a pattern that required you to earn what should have been basic: stable love, clear communication, mutual effort, emotional safety. When you demand a new entry price, you're not being unrealistic. You're being emotionally adult. You are saying, "My peace is not the prize you get for missing me. My peace is the standard you must respect if you want access to my life." That is how no contact stops being a temporary silence and becomes a permanent upgrade in how you love yourself.